Howdy, folks. Happy Friday, TGIF. We are now, I believe, 10 days away from the trade deadline. It's probably going to get very busy from here until February 24th. We've only had two, what I would consider major deals in February, but I think it's going to pick up, especially with the number of injuries that have gone on in the last week or so, affecting teams that are competing for playoff spots. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Russ, want to start us off with a pre-show?
Yeah, more Astros fallout. So more of what we were talking about yesterday, because this was handled so poorly by the Astros owner and the players in a very cowardly fashion, baseball players are going to police this situation. And so when the Dodgers play the Astros and Clayton Kershaw's pitching, watch out. And I think that is the biggest fallout that will now happen because they haven't satisfied many of the players. I mean, we've heard at least 4 or 5 players speak out on how upset they were about the situation, and they don't feel like baseball handled it well. And apparently, Kev, they've been they've been turning the Astros in for a couple of years now, and Major League Baseball didn't do anything about it. So this problem is not going away.
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, it seemed lame is the word that everybody seems to have embraced in terms of their apology. An amazing part of that is I'm reasonably sure that this, they brought someone in to tell them what to do, and this is what decided they should do. And the one thing that it lacked is sincerity. And it would have been much better had they just opened up the room and let everybody say their piece, and rather than having orchestrated and prepared statements and it just and I think just what you said, it was handled poorly, and it doesn't even matter whether it was sincere or not because it was handled so poorly. It was difficult to believe it.
Kev, it was a case study in how not to do it. First of all, the day before on Wednesday, the media was all there and they didn't make anybody available.
Right.
I don't know what event it was, but they basically made nobody available. Then yesterday, Altuve and Bregman, I think, were available for for 90 seconds. It was something ridiculous. And Jim Crane, the owner, comes out and contradicts himself saying, I don't think it had an effect on the game. And then 15 seconds later says, I think it had an effect on the game. It's like, I mean, if there was a PR crisis manager that was hired, his profession is in trouble. I mean, or he's in trouble because they screwed everything up.
Yeah, no, it didn't come across well. But, the biggest issue here is something totally out of the Astros' control, which is whether or not their title should have been vacated, whether or not there should be an asterisk, all those things. Like, they don't have any control over. And I think that's that people want. I'm not sure any level of apology is going to work for the masses. It's kind of like no different than what we see now in the political scene. The Attorney General Barr comes on and said what Democrats wanted him to say, and then now the question is, was it sincere? Was it orchestrated? So no level of apology really was going to work, but that doesn't change the fact that it was handled so poorly.
Yeah,
that now it's just taking it beyond to a different level, and I just feel like, even though I think this issue is a little bit complicated because sign stealing is a long tradition.
Sure.
It's just when you go to that length to steal signs that it's becomes illegal and unethical. The guy standing on second base, that's just part of the logistics of the game. It's actually kind of a fun tradition, because it's a lot harder than. That's the one thing that's been lost in all this is how difficult it is. It really speaks to the talent of major league players that, it has to capture that and then relay it to the guy on the garbage cans who had to relay it to the batter. And all this has happened within a second. And yet guys like Bregman and Altuve, they can take advantage of that. That's how incredible these athletes are.
And apparently and I heard this from the guy on Twitter, John Boy, who who broke this a few months ago. Like I said, I think he should win a Pulitzer Prize. He's unbelievable. But he came out, he was interviewed on a New York radio station, and he said, a lot of major league teams, and this isn't illegal, but there's some sort of app that somebody developed that could decode signs, basically the sequence. It's like there's an algorithm where you type in like 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and it tells you fastball or curveball, and all the major league teams are using that. But that's not illegal.
No, but it's not. It's illegal to use it at the ballpark. Like, you're not allowed to have your cell phone in the dugout.
But they're doing it after the fact, Russ.
Right, after the fact. But
that's fine.
While the game's going on, that's the issue.
Right, but because these video rooms are right off of the dugout,
that's what makes it illegal.
Exactly. So I mean, and I'll tell you something right now. The batters who touched the dirt in the batter's box when Bob Gibson was pitching, they got it in the chops. When they did that, that's what the Astros are going to get all year, because there are people who are pissed. There's a lawsuit against him from some guy who got sent down after he got bombed by the Astros. A lot of teams are pissed off. This is going to be frontier justice, and I don't think if Major League Baseball starts suspending people for throwing at the Astros, then they're going to look like a protected class. I mean, this is it has to
come on. They have to suspend. You can't have. You have to suspend guys if they throw it.
Okay, it'll be some guy that's called up from AAA, and he'll be the
whatever. But they'll be
but you got to suspend them. I mean, you can't let
All right, now you're just getting crazy.
I tend to go a step too far. Okay, let me just relate this story quickly, because it's a little gross, but probably funny too. I was on my way up to Toronto yesterday for the Leafs Dallas Stars game. Previous to that, I had bought a brand new pair of earbuds, not expensive ones, just like the wired ones, like the $9 Skull Candy, because the ones I had were old and the wired separated, so I could only hear out of one. So I'm listening to something on my phone, and just before getting off the train, had to go to the on train facilities to take care of something, and the train hits a bump, a rather big bump, and the headphones fall out of my ears and right into the toilet. Needless to say, they ended up in the garbage, because based on the blue slime that was in this toilet, I was never putting them anywhere close to me again. So there you go. That's just my bad luck. Anyway, okay. It's just me. It's like, luckily it wasn't like a pair of what are the expensive big headphones? Those
wasn't your glasses.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've heard many a tale of people losing their cell phones out of their pockets.
Oh yeah. It happened to me once.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, February 14th, 2020. Happy Valentine's Day.
I'm Russ Cohen, and apparently I'm Kevin Allen's biggest fan, according to Facebook, and have a badge to prove it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that story. I got it for you. The only thing is, I didn't recognize your phone number.
I know.
So I had to find out who it was, who my biggest fan was. I'm Kevin Allen, still a free agent.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, we'll start with a rather puzzling incident last night. I was at the Stars Leafs game, and all of a sudden Zach Kassian's name was trending, Kevin. And I checked out the video of the Oilers playing Tampa Bay. And believe me, the Oilers don't need this right now with McDavid out and James Neal out. So they need all hands on deck. Zach Kassian, in a sort of scrum on the ice, so I think it was with Eric Cernak, the big defenseman, kicks him basically in the middle of the chest with his skate. Now, we know that this is not the first rodeo for Kassian, because he got suspended for the Matthew Tkachuk incident earlier in the year. He's had some other incidents regarding center ice checks and things of that nature. But this is a new level, because when players will kick with skates, especially with the rash of skate cuts that we've had recently, that's extremely dangerous. So I mean, I think he's going to get the book thrown at him, and I'm not talking about like 3 or 4 games. I think it's going to be an in-person hearing, and he could get 7, 8, 10, something like that. What do you think, Kev?
Yeah, you're definitely talking an in-person hearing. That's assault with a scary, weapon, and I think hockey players don't fear much, but I think they fear skate cuts, most of them, the vast majority happen by accident. So when something like that happens, I think most players would support that. That's the absurdity of that. And as you mentioned, boy, the timing couldn't be worse. Yeah. Given the circumstances there. So yeah, I would agree with you. I wouldn't want to predict. I think Peros, who's a very smart man, has been rather unpredictable, I think, in terms of sorting out what he's going to do. I think he's sincere in what he does, but he's not what I call a consensus judge.
No,
he's a guy that's sort of been difficult to predict. So I wouldn't want to say, but I agree with you. If you don't call that in for a in-person hearing, then where are we at?
No, he does have an in-person hearing that is set up. So he's going to get at least 5. Yeah. I think he should get 10. I don't know if he will get 10.
Right.
But they also have to just ask this guy, like, what's wrong? Can you not control yourself? Because that is so much of a scary situation that I might, tell him, you might have to go to anger management class, because this has gone beyond, swinging even a stick at somebody. Like, you gash open this guy's chest, you're in jail. You're probably going to jail.
Yeah. No, I think definitely. And like I said, we've had 2 incidents in the last, I'd say, month. One, and both of them were accidental. The Cizikas skate cut, and then the Ilya Mikheyev laceration.
Well, also Perlini on his nose.
Who was it?
Brendan Perlini had a skate cutter on his nose.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that one. But what we're saying is these skates are sharpened to weapon-like sharpness. Yeah. So
did you say Casey Cizikas? Because he's out 4 to 6 with a skate cutter on his leg. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first one I mentioned. So this is not something to be dilly-dallied with. No. You have 2 weapons on your feet, and if you're doing that. It's just not good. So, I mean, now, Kevin, the funny thing is you're talking about the consistency of George Peros. Russ and I were talking yesterday with Eck about the incident with Brendan Gallagher and Zdeno Chara. And, don't get me wrong. I mean, Chara is a monster, so he's going to leave, it's like a bull in a china shop. He's going to leave things in his wake. But I go back to the playoffs last year in Game 7 when he punched John Tavares and knocked him down with a right cross to the jaw, and then a couple days ago with the cross check to the throat and jaw of Gallagher. And believe me, I'm sure that most of his teammates would have paid the $5,000 just to have him do it. But I can't believe he didn't get suspended for either one of them.
Yeah, particularly this last one too. When my wife was a longtime high school soccer coach, and it used to bother her that big players in soccer, especially high school soccer, always seemed in her mind to be called more for fouls, and she would always tell the referee, it's not a foul to be big. And I think Chara, I think referees tend to give him the benefit of the doubt because he is a big guy. And so they tend to think, I don't want to overcharge him. But now they've carried it to the extreme because he's getting undercharged, in my opinion. And in this case, that stick to the face, how could that not be at least a 1-game suspension?
Chara's been skirting this for a while, Kev, and he really does deserve some sort of suspension at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way he has a clean record. He's been playing dirtier the last 2 years as he's gotten a little older, and he definitely should get some sort of suspension, and he should have for that. But the day's coming. It has to be. I mean, you can't just keep letting this guy get away with what he wants to at his size.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. And, going back to Kassian, I wonder whether Peros will kind of split the difference between 5 and 10, and
it might go 7.
Go 7 or 8, probably 7, but we'll see.
Now, we have seen an incredible rash of injuries in the last, I would say, week to 10 days, and involving, like we mentioned, Cizikas. McDavid is out for, they say 2 to 3 weeks with this quad injury. I think they're just being extra careful. And let me just touch on that one, Kev, because McDavid had his injury in the last game of last year, not treated by the Oilers medical staff, but he handled it on his own with a doctor named Mark Lindsay in the Toronto area, and had it rehabilitated with Gary Roberts and a whole team in Toronto. And when this injury happened, he immediately went to Toronto and is handling it on his own, not handling it through the Oilers. And some of the questions are being raised. It's like, okay, I mean, he's got a vested interest in his career, so I don't know why the Oilers would have a problem with that. I mean, but there are some people who are saying, well, they're not in the loop on this, and is that a good thing, or is that something that they probably don't like too much?
Well, I think they should definitely be in the loop, but I'm respectful of the fact that the players are not slaves, and they have their own physicians, and I think it's well within their rights to consult with that. But I also think that if they're indeed, and I don't know whether they are or they aren't in the loop on this, but if they're not, they should be. I mean,
sure.
And I don't even know why Connor McDavid would not want them in the loop.
Oh, I'm sure they're being informed, but if they want hands-on, obviously.
Yeah, people just always want control.
Sure.
And it always just sort of feels like, if a player is going to his own physician, that they don't have control. And, this should have happened a long time ago, in my opinion. If you have the means, as superstars do, you ought to be entitled to go to whomever you want to, because it is your future. A team physician is beholding, and they all take oaths. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that team physicians are playing players when they shouldn't, but their allegiance is to the team. That's they're the team physician. So if I'm a player, I would want my guy his only concern is me, to be my guy. So I think we're going to see more and more of that in all sports. And you've already seen it for years. How many shoulders immediately go to Andrews,
right?
And in baseball, and you see it in other sports as well. Guys get a reputation, and players want to go to them, and agents know who the best people are, and they want to get their guy there as well. So I don't really think there's any controversy here. I think the big question in Edmonton, because I just think it's so important that they make the playoffs. And I wrote a freelance piece this week on Hockey Buzz about that, and I was surprised that not all the Oilers fans agree with me. Which really just kind of speaks to how sports have changed. I think there's two levels now of rooting for your team. There's when you want them to win, and then when you want them to lose,
right?
Or that you're tolerant of not sacrificing anything as part of the rebuild. And some of the arguments that Oilers fans have made about not going for it is they don't want to give up any prospect. And my feeling is that there are times when it's worth giving them up, and sometimes it's to make a good run at the Cup, or in this case, just to get into the playoffs, because you haven't been there only once in the last 13 seasons. And I think the fan base needs that. I think the league needs Connor McDavid in the playoffs. He's the most dynamic player in the game. They need him in there. They need Draisaitl in the playoffs. You want the best players to play. And you know what? The Pacific is wide open.
Yeah.
Like if you ended up second playing the third place team, who knows? I don't see them, the Oilers, among the prime contenders, but I would be more than willing to give up third round picks and fourth round picks.
Sure, I would do that. Yes.
Yeah, and Paul Jarvie, I would move.
They have to move him anyhow, so I'm okay with that too.
And if Ken Holland says I'm not giving up my first round pick, I'm very respectful of that. But there are ways. You got to be creative. Like part of being a new wave general manager, a modern general manager, is to find the creativity to not sacrifice or endanger your future to make moves to make it better. Now, I wouldn't give up like 2 firsts to get some player, but I might give up a second depending on who it is. And I might give up a B prospect or a B plus prospect. I wouldn't give up, an A prospect if I was the Oilers, but I think there are ways they can help the team. For example, Glendening, a player that Ken Holland knows a lot about. He has a friendship with Yzerman, so the starting basis of trade talks will be rather simple. Is he going to cost more than a 3rd round or 4th round pick?
No, and I'll tell you why. He'll be thrilled to get out of there because a month and a half ago when I was interviewing him, there was nobody sadder in the Red Wings locker room when they were lost like 10 straight than Glendening. He was just killing them.
Yeah, and he could be a helpful player. This is a guy that's going to score 10 to 12. So those are the kind of moves that I think they could make, and I still think it's very important. So that gets us all back to Connor McDavid. But all of that is, that's why getting him back on the ice, is pretty darn crucial for the team.
And with my usual sense and tendency for hyperbole, I said to Ack earlier in the week, I said, I think the Oilers, if McDavid's out for 2 or 3 weeks, this could be the difference between making and missing the playoffs. Their schedule is not exactly tough. They've played, they played Chicago and they beat them. They played Tampa without Stamkos, Kucherov, McDonough, and Cirelli, and they lost 3-1. So, if they can get through this at 500, they may have a chance of making the playoffs. But it's going to be tough without the best player in the league to play 500 hockey.
There's one part, though, that's lost in this, Kev, and we hit on it the other day because I asked Mike if it was the same side as his knee, that quad is. Yeah. And we don't know what the durability of Connor McDavid will be the rest of the season because he already came back without getting surgery, which was unprecedented. Yeah. And so you don't know what this is going to do to him and what kind of shape he'll be in when he comes back because this is all uncharted territory. So just to say he'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks is one thing, but he might come back 75% because he just may not be able to be 100% or even close to it until the season ends and he can start rehabbing again.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. But we've also talked to players who have said, sometimes an injury can be a blessing. Now, not in this case because there's so much at stake because you get some rest, going into the playoffs. So, he's obviously played a lot of hockey and he logs a lot of minutes. Right. So one issue that's out there that I wanted to talk a little bit about because I know you guys have addressed this before too, but I had it confirmed. I talked to Jim Nill this week, the Dallas Stars GM, on the record, and just because I asked him how much chatter there was out there, and he said. Not as much as you would have thought there would be by now. And he said the problem is there's really only 5. There's not enough players in the marketplace. Right. He said it's really only in his estimation. He didn't name them, but he said there are only 5 teams committed to selling players. And he said in 2 cases he's not interested in those teams' players. So there, with 5 teams available, and he goes, there are 5 teams roughly that are committed to going out and getting players. So anyway, the bottom line is there's just not enough out there to go out and think that now's the time to make moves. You're gonna have to wait till you get closer when teams go home.
And then still, there are teams like even the Canadians might still be in this fog.
Yeah.
Chicago is definitely in this fog, thinking they're still in it, and they're going to have it smack them in the face before they realize what their actual plan is. So I get that.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo's at 60, and the Leafs are at 68 in 3rd place, so they're 8 points out of 3rd place. They may be under some sort of fantasy that they play Toronto on Sunday. They can catch them.
Yeah, if you're at 58 or 60 points right now in this season in the East, you're done.
Yeah, they've got 4 teams in between them, so it's like that. Jason Botterill can't be lying to himself, but no, I mean, and that'll probably sort itself out in in a week or so when these teams come to the realization that that maybe they're mathematically still in it, but they're not realistically still in the playoff race. I would say there's probably going to end up being about 10 sellers. It's just a question of the quality that's out there. We've heard Kreider, he may re-sign. We've heard Toffoli and Pajot. We've heard Vatanen and Brendan Dillon. But after that, it's like, a bunch of Dylan DeMello. And I'm not minimizing Dylan DeMello, but a bunch of Dylan DeMello UFAs making $900,000 or veterans where the salary is going to have to be retained. It's not a great it's not a great market, and there's not a lot of cap space out there, Kev.
No, there isn't. I'm less worried about that. I think, the guys always seem to figure out how to manipulate cap space in order to make it work. But right now, there's not a lot out there. And I think Kreider will eventually end up in the marketplace. I know they're making an effort to re-sign him, but if you're getting this close.
I know. It's hard to bang out a deal in 2 weeks. That's what I kept saying, too.
Yeah, I just don't see it getting done. And, you would think he would just want to test the market and see what's out there, because I don't think they can afford to give him what he could get in the marketplace.
No, I think he wants 7 years, and I don't think they're willing to give 7 years.
No.
But let's talk about the other issue there.
Okay.
Kev, we've seen this before. We saw this with Derek Jeter in New York. We saw this in other places where all of a sudden the aging star is set in his ways. There's a contract that you can't do anything about, and teams, management do everything they can to sort of push this guy out. In New York, this happens all the time. It always happens a couple of years before you expect it to, but now it's not that for Lundqvist. But I don't really like the way the Rangers are doing this. I don't like the fact that Quinn names Shesterkin the number one. Then, of course, he hurts his ankle. That's typical Ranger fashion right there. You name your number one goalie, and then the guy gets hurt.
Right.
So Lundqvist is still there, and he's telling – I don't know how he told people with a straight face that Lundqvist and Georgiev are fighting for a job. Like, I don't know how you say that with a straight face. To me, this is so obvious what's going on, but they don't realize Lundqvist isn't going to care. He cares in his heart that this is going to bother him down the line, but he's not going to leave just because you want him to.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, and in this case, I always feel you should just basically be totally open with the player and treat him with respect. Like, he's been an institution. With the Rangers, and
he's the best goalie they've ever had in the history of the franchise.
Yeah, and I get that some fans, don't always love him, but I think that's just part and parcel of being a goalie in an NHL city. Not everybody loves Carey Price every day. That's just the way it goes. I don't think there's a harder job than being a goalie in Montreal. Mm-hmm. But the problem that I see it is, Henrik Lundqvist sees himself as a New Yorker. Like, he even told me this fall that he was planning to retire there unless he changes his mind. So, I think this would be hard for him. I just wonder at this point whether he would, just for the good of the team, if you ask him nicely, because, hey, boy, wouldn't he look good playing for Carolina or
Colorado?
Sure.
Yeah.
I never gotten the feeling he would, Kev. Just the same answer he gave you is the same answer he's always given. And I always felt like when he won a gold medal, that satisfied him a little bit. He would like to win a cup, but he also doesn't want to uproot his family, and he likes being in New York, and that's what he is.
Yeah, but, he doesn't really have to uproot his family. I know,
but
he could just stay where he is and then go to Carolina. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but you may be right. Maybe he's like Matt Sundin. Remember, Matt's had a chance to leave.
Yeah.
And he just said, no.
I mean, I'll give you an example.
I remember that one, Kev.
I'm going to give you an example, though. I know a guy who used to manage a well-known supermarket in the city, right? Every week, Lundqvist would go in there with his family, with his kid, and they go shopping in the supermarket just like he's anybody else, right? That's the kind of life he wants to have in New York until he's probably retired, and then he'll probably split time between, like, New York and Sweden. But that's the kind of life he has, and I don't think he even wants to change that a little.
And if he has a no movement clause, so if he says I'm not going to move, they can't move him.
Nothing.
Right. The solution might be, and I this would be really bad optics, but the solution might be to buy him out of the last year of his contract.
They won't do it. That would be the worst. I mean,
right.
I can't tell you they're adverse to the worst PR because the Knicks are already getting the worst PR, but I don't think they want it times two.
No, and I just can't see him. I mean, especially with John Davidson there.
That would look really bad.
Yeah, I don't see them.
Besides, they need to buy out Mark Stahl. Henrik Lundqvist can still play.
Right.
Mark Stahl is the one that that's their last buyout that they could use. They can't waste it on Lundqvist. And honestly, they could go with the 3 goalies, like I said, next year, roll into the season with it. They can get another goalie to put in Hartford that has some NHL experience so they can make him available for the expansion draft. And then at the deadline, they could ask Lundqvist, hey, would you want to go somewhere for a quarter of the season? And if he doesn't, then he retires. Then he just walks away from being a Ranger and he's a free agent. And then you worry about, you don't worry about Lundqvist after next year.
And Russ, what this tells me is that they're not getting any kind of offer that they think is worthy of Georgiev.
Not what they wanted, right?
Yeah, I think they were looking for, and they may get this at the draft, Kev. They may get a offer for Georgiev because they believe he might be a future number 1 for somebody else. Just not for them because they have Shishorkin, but they're probably wanting a first-round pick or a top 9 forward from somebody who's young and retainable, and they're probably not getting that right now because teams that are interested in him aren't willing to give that up. So
the Leafs killed the goalie market. I tell you that because they got Campbell so reasonably that killed anything for Georgiev. The only thing that would raise the price or get their price for Georgiev is in the next 2 weeks, the number 1 goes down where a team doesn't like their backup and they feel like they can win the cup. That is the only way.
Yeah. Kev, I want to get your impressions on the deal that Jim Rutherford made. Jim Rutherford is, for the Hockey Buzzcast needs to send him like a gift box because he's always the one who makes the deal. And the Penguins are in the opposite position of the Oilers because the Oilers, McDavid and Draisaitl are young. They've got years, although there's pressure from the market to make the playoffs. Rutherford's in the position where he's got Malkin and Crosby in their early 30s. The window is closing. We said that when they traded for Phil Kessel a couple years ago. Now they get Zucker, and they traded one of their better prospects in their organization and a 2020 first-round pick. And I don't think they care. I mean, I heard him interviewed, and he's like, okay, we have to go for it because we got these guys. We've got an opportunity to win another cup in the next couple years. And they get Zucker for Kalen Addison, a number 1, and dump Alex Galchenyuk's salary. I think that's a great deal, really a great deal for the Penguins.
Oh, it's a home run. There's no doubt about it. And, that's who Jim Rutherford is. Historically, he makes trades usually well before the trade deadline. Going back to the year he won the cup, I think he got Doug Weight in January, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And that's what he likes to do. He likes to, so they have time to assimilate into the team. He got a player, not a rental. He got a player who's going to be able to be on the team. They're always short. Seems like because they got 2 superstar centers, they're always short of wingers. And by that I mean quality wingers who can play with elite level centers. I think Zucker can do that. It's just a great fit and a great trade. And, I don't care. That's why, and I've talked to Jim about this and where I've sort of got my idea that, we over worry about cap space. Jim Rutherford, regardless of what his cap situation, always finds a way to make a deal.
Well, but we have to, Kevin, I'm starting to give credit, though, to their capologists because they have more cap space than a lot of teams under them, even with the salaries they have on that team. They have $3.3 million in cap space. We have to give a nod of the cap to the capologist.
Well, for sure. But he just always figures out a way to do it, and he knows what he's got to do. He knows what salary he's got to move out. He's always got a plan. He's got a plan B.
So I watched some of the Wild game yesterday. Right, they played the Rangers. They did get a point, so that helps them a little bit. But I got to tell you, they had the shootout. They got ripped off in the shootout because Artemi Panarin was going into shootout on Stalock, and he made 2 moves, and he drifted to the outside of the net, and he drifted backwards and then shot it high. The refs huddled up, and they determined that the puck didn't stop forward motion, but I'm telling you, it stopped forward motion because it went sideways like he did. So that's something where this time of the year, boy, that really could hurt a team's playoff chances. Now, I'm not going to tell you they would have won the shootout because Stalock didn't look particularly sharp in the shootout. But the fact is that put them up 2-0 in the shootout. And I can't believe it now that shootouts are going to become contentious because refs can't get it right either.
Jeez.
But going back to the Penguins, I don't think we're paying enough attention to how good or how well the Penguins are playing.
Oh.
They're
terrific now. It's gone from being awful to really good.
Yeah, and they're no matter who's been hurt, they've stayed in there, and they've figured out how to do it. I think I looked the other day, and they're 6th in goal scoring and 6th in goals against. They're a well-rounded team.
Well, the one thing, I'll tell you this. You know how every year now, it won't be next year, but for the last 3-4 years, the Fall Classic's been in Pittsburgh every year, so I'm always there. And so I always take in Penguins practices, and I see how Sullivan is with those players and with actually fans and everything else. Mm-hmm. And that's why last year when people were like saying, oh, I don't know if Sullivan will get fired, I was dead set against it because I see the impact he has daily on the fan base there and on the city and everything else. Sullivan's doing a great job, and that's why that whole report last year just didn't even make sense.
Yeah, I never thought he was really in danger last year.
And to your point about their cap management, I mean, they had the money because Gensel's going to be out the rest of the regular season. He might be able to come back for the playoffs, but they had the money on long-term injury from the Gensel's contract, which I think was $5.5 million. In the deal with Minnesota, they include Galchenyuk, which probably meant they had to pay a little more to get Minnesota to take Galchenyuk's salary. But he's almost $5 million. So now, and there are reports that Rutherford is probably going to look to make one more deal before the deadline, probably to bolster their defense because they've had some injuries there with Schultz and Dumoulin being out at times, and Marino's out right now. So, I mean, they're set. I mean, I don't know if they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but I think Rutherford is doing everything he possibly can to put enough talent there, and they have two really good goalies too, Kev. So I think they're well positioned.
Yeah, no, they are, and I think you put it best when you said I don't know if they're going to win the cup. Rutherford doesn't either. But for some teams, it makes sense to push all in, and the number one is Malkin and Crosby aren't getting any younger.
Right.
And they're still playing at an elite level.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're not starting the downward slope.
Malkin's having his best year, maybe.
Yeah, no, they're just playing great. And, you got to reward those guys by giving them all the tools they need. The Gunsel loss injury was really difficult, for them, as particularly when they've, just endured all those other injuries and managed to play well. And the real thing is, as I know Russ has brought this up continuously, Tristan Jarry has been such a bonus for them. At the start of the year, people thought he was going to be traded.
Yeah.
And now, he's been unbelievable. So, this team, who knows? Tampa's playing pretty well. Pittsburgh, who knows whether they can beat Tampa, but they've been very good this season. And I see them as strong as Washington or Tampa or Boston. Mm-hmm. They can compete with any of those teams in my book.
I do want to caution people, and because I bet you they're starting to think, oh, I don't know, the Caps don't look so good. I don't know how far they'll go. The Caps do this now. Ever since they won the President's Trophy, I think they do take their foot off the gas a little bit. They don't care about winning the President's Trophy. They have enough guys that know how to win. Mm-hmm. And right now I think they're just hitting that slumpy part of the year where they're not playing at their best. They're not dogging it, but they're not playing at their best. And I think that's fine, where we see Tampa's coming on gangbusters, which we all expected Tampa would, and Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh. But I don't think the Caps care if they come in first or third in that conference. I don't.
I actually think it's better to finish second. You play the third place team as opposed, those wild card teams are always the hottest teams at the end of the team because they've had to go 9-1 or 8-2 to get in
playoffs for the last month by the time.
Yeah. So they're in playoff mode, and you get them, and they're really fired up because they've made a late charge. And I think there's no reward for winning the division. I think you're better off. At least you know what you're getting. The number 2 seed says, we've been better than and continue to be better than that number 3 seed. And what do you guys think about the baseball proposal?
I hate it. I hate it.
Pick who you're going to play. That sure would be interesting in the NHL.
You know what?
Here's the thing.
Well, let me just say this, Russ. I'll give Jeff Merrick from Sportsnet credit because he mentioned this as a good idea for the NHL over a year ago. I heard him on the podcast that he does say it. I don't know because all I know is that this, what are you going to do? You're going to give bulletin board material to another team by saying, okay, we're picking you because we think you suck the most.
Yeah, that's how it would come across. That's not really how it is, but
no, but
it would come across.
I will tell you this. I think it's a horrible idea for the NHL. I can't tell you how many times, and Kev, you know this yourself, that you've asked players, or GMs, who would you prefer to play? And they always say, I don't care.
Yeah, I know, for sure.
But now that it'll be made public, and fans will kill their team if they pick the wrong team,
right.
It will be like a new level of just hate that would be on Twitter if it happened. I just don't see the positive in it. It will create fake drama. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea.
That's a good word for it. It will create fake drama. From a reporting standpoint, it would be unbelievably fun. But
yes.
You're absolutely right. What's the benefit? The argument would be the benefit is just what I said, is that sometimes the reward for winning the division isn't one because of how hot the team is.
Right.
But it's always, you could just draw names out of a hat and get the same result.
But at least it's random that way. It's still better off being random, or at least if it comes down to the last game or two of a season and a team legitimately can control who they want to play against, that's fine because they've earned that right.
Well, if you really wanted to give place greater importance on the regular season, you would simply just seed the teams 1 through 16.
Correct.
And you would reseed after every round.
Right.
Now, the argument of that is, we did this at USA Today. It was last year where we did rule changes that would change, and I did it with the NBA writer as well, and he actually interviewed NBA coaches who said that the argument about the travel is silly in today's modern NHL. He said that we travel on obviously charters, and guys can stretch out and sleep, and he said it's not the same as it was 10 years ago. He said so he thought it was doable. Or both of them did.
I remember. I think it was 79 to 82 when it was 1 through 16. And I remember because the Sabres in the first round played Pittsburgh. Then they played.
There were some weird matchups.
Minnesota, Chicago, Vancouver. Like these were all first round, and they were best of 3, which was really strange.
Yeah.
It's like when the Rangers played the Kings and they had the melee with Field.
Yeah. The Nick Fotiu, Paul Pagano fight. Yes.
I will tell you this, Kev. I would be in favor of, and the NFL used to do it like this. If you're going 1 through 16, maybe don't reseed, because if the number 1 loses to the 16, then they have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So what? They earned it.
Well, I think this proposal
that would throw things upside down too.
Yeah, it would.
I think I'd reseed. So you carry.
I like reseeding too. Either way.
Yeah. I think with this proposal from Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball indicates, or will indicate in reference to hockey, is when the new season, and I'm convinced of this, Kev, maybe I'll be wrong, and I'm sure if I am wrong, you'll tell me about it, that I believe that there is going to be, that there's going to be play-in games, and it's going to be up to 20 teams. We'll have a play-in game between, say, the wild cards, the 7th and 8th and the 9th and 10th, and they'll do that because that's more revenue. They could sell that as a separate TV contract, like Major League Baseball does with TBS. I think that it's going that way. There were rumors about it before the last CBA, and then it ended up never happening. But I'll bet you that's probably what's going to happen in this CBA.
Well, I am definitely in favor of that. I have been in favor of a play-in for multiple years, and
I'm okay with that.
Oh yeah, anybody who watches baseball, I think that's as exciting as the World Series.
Yeah,
those 1-game playoffs are so much fun. And I think it would be the same thing in hockey. You could charge $300 a ticket easy on those games.
Oh yeah.
I think everybody would just be excited. And the argument against them that it shouldn't come down to a one game. Well, it does anyway. You're just moving that from the last game of the regular season to a post game,
Right.
or to a postseason game. That's all. Because that's what happens. Sometimes it comes down to the final game where one team has to win.
I mean, the Super Bowl is a one-game playoff.
Yeah. So I'm not bothered by that. And if you don't like it, don't get into that position.
Right.
That's the name of the game. So I think there'd be so much interest in that game. I think it would be huge. I think you could sell the TV rights to some, TNT or some other entities. You create ancillary revenue. I think it's just total excitement. The problem is, and I'm actually surprised at this, but Gary Bettman, now, he evolves. Gary Bettman has been opposed to this. He has said so in press conferences where he's not in favor of that.
Right.
Now, he can change his mind for sure. And, we can get it. So I hope that we see that, because I just really enjoy it in baseball. And I think it would work wonders in the NHL.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Kevin, it has come down to a final game. I know, like Dallas and Minnesota a couple years ago, game 82, it was determinative. For one of them making the playoffs. Russ remembers Ole Jokinen in the shootout against Philadelphia. Yeah, the Leafs a few years ago were depending on New Jersey beating the Islanders. The Wade Dublovitz playing in goals. So it's already coming down.
Actually, I was at that game where he won the last game of the year and made it into the playoffs. So.
Yeah, it was an Easter Sunday game. I wanted to get your input on the news that came down earlier this week. And I think the NHL probably was not happy that it came down regarding the IOC and the IIA basically succumbing to some of the demands that they say, because the NHL, when I think they made their response, they were essentially saying, well, that's great, and that'll be, but we still have a problem with going to the Olympics. And I think, and I've said this is a negotiating point for the CBA, and they want it to remain a negotiating point for the CBA.
Yeah, and I think it will be. But it was capitulation from the IOC, which was important. See, the lack of interest in the Olympics by the NHL is multifaceted. But a big part of it was how poorly they were treated, and I completely agree with the NHL on this, by the IOC.
Right.
Here the NHL is providing the talent for these tournaments, disrupting its season. And they were getting nothing in return from the IOC. They weren't getting, full travel expenses. Right. They weren't basically allowed inside the ropes. They didn't get any marketing rights. When the owners and general managers and scouts wanted to go, they didn't get any special treatment. They weren't treated well, considering what they were providing as allowing their players to go. And I always thought it was short-sighted on the IOC to do that. But there are other elements to this. Obviously, the fear of injury is a major one. Sure. Obviously, in the NHL, profitability is tied to playoff appearances. And the more rounds you go, the more money you make. If you don't make the playoffs, it's hard to make money in the NHL. Right. So if you lose your top player, which, we've seen that happen. We've seen players injured. Tavares, Hasek come to mind. Mm-hmm. So that's a legitimate concern as well. The third element is that they got to shut down the season. That causes hardships. It doesn't cause a hardship in Toronto or Boston or with the New York Rangers, but it does a little bit in Nashville and Arizona and Carolina and everything, where you got to restart after people have kind of lost interest for a couple of weeks. So all those are legitimate issues. I've always understood that. Saying all that, I just think the stage of the Olympics is so huge that you have to go. You have to go. You got to showcase the talent so that you can sell the game in China, sell the game in Japan. You even gain, in my opinion, some fans in America. How many times have I covered the Olympics and people have been. I remember in Sochi. People were watching Alex Ovechkin played, and I would get emails from people saying, tell me about, Ovechkin. Like, what team does he play for in the NHL? Like, they didn't follow the NHL.
Right.
It wasn't their thing, but they loved, Olympic hockey. So I just think it's such a huge event, and it's just 100 times the visibility of an NHL game when you're at the Olympics, and I just think it's worth it. So, but Mike's also right. It is a bargaining chip, and even if and I don't think the league wants to go, but even if they're willing to go, they're not going to give it up without being part of a CBA and hopeful. I think what they really want to use it for is not to gain any specific item. It's to make it an easier extension.
Right.
So it's a final push saying, look, if we had just agreed to this deal as similar to what we have now with some tweaking, you guys can go to the Olympics, which is big to players. They want to go.
It's like throwing in rubber floor mats when you're buying a car.
Yeah, I'm just exhausted by the whole subject.
Yeah, actually, it's probably like a good sound system. Yeah, instead of the floor mats. But yeah, that's exactly right. They just want to.
Well, Mike clearly values the floor mats over the sound system. I think.
Yeah, but
I would do Buffalo. It's slushy here.
Yeah. But the other issue of this is that even players that don't go like the Olympic break. Like,
right.
That's a nice, and now we all have those breaks anyway. But that Olympic break when you can take the family to Disney World, if you're a third pairing defenseman or a third line forward, that's a nice Benny. Every 4 years, you're going to be able to take an extended mid-season vacation and go to Cabo or whatever.
But Ross, I think what the NHL has to do, because they haven't done this in the past, they eliminate the All-Star game when they go to the Olympics. They might have to eliminate the bye week and start the season early. Like, start the season September 15th. Cut your preseason games in half.
Right.
Start training camp a week or two early. Get the season started, because otherwise, the schedules are compacted as it is. If you're going to have like 4 games in 6 nights 4 or 5 times, you're going to have injuries. I think they have to adjust the schedule accordingly.
Can I say that if they agree that the Olympic participation is the CBA, can we have one line that says is that there'd be no whining about the compressed schedule during the Olympic year? Because it's going to happen.
Sure.
You'll hear about it 500 times during the season, and it is true. Like we all remember what it's like. They're playing. It feels like they're playing. 2 games every 3 days.
All right, so I have breaking news. I was just reading an article by Adam Zielonka from the Washington Post, who, because the Capitals are away from their families and wives and girlfriends on Valentine's Day, some of the players got ring tattoos. Now, I'm going to tell you, if I knew I could get a ring tattoo for my wife rather than getting a real ring, boy, that would have been a nice gift one year. And they're setting a bad example for the rest of the men in this world. I'm telling you that.
And these are millionaires. They can afford rings. Come on.
Yeah, no.
They're getting ring tattoos because they're going to be away. I'm pretty sure my wife would rather have something else other than a ring tattoo.
I was going to go to Sam's Club and buy a massive Cracker Jack box, hoping I could find a ring in there. Anyway, okay.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up here, because especially since Russ is here, because I know Russ, I'm sure, appreciated this like I did. Did you see Alan Walsh's Twitter feed today?
I always see Alan Walsh's Twitter.
He went to the Kings game and sat next to a dog the entire game. And this dog is the most handsome dog, number one.
It's a great-looking dog.
Great-looking dog. And Alan reported that the dog watched all 3 periods.
Right.
So apparently the dog is quite a hockey fan.
It was the first tweet this year that I enjoyed from Alan Walsh.
Yeah,
and he apparently did not break out his cell phone at any point in the game. So the dog actually watched the game as opposed to.
And the dog didn't complain about Gary Bettman incessantly like Alan Walsh does.
I am proud to say that one of the few people who have blocked me on Twitter has been Alan Walsh. So I didn't
see that tweet. It was a great tweet.
Yeah. Just couple things about a couple games last night, and just we'll end the show in a few minutes here.
You sort of buried the lead here, Mike. I thought you would have gotten to this already.
What, the Dallas Toronto game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the thing is, I think this was wrong because I watched what was reported was that Dallas scored on the first shot of every period. It was a 3-2 win for the Stars. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I thought Anderson made the stop on the first shot, and then the rebound was scored.
That's what I thought too on that one.
But they guess they counted that as the first
Okay.
shot. But Kev, this has been symptomatic of the Maple Leafs, and they're a young team defensively. They're just not a formed franchise. They just haven't been for the last few years, and they allowed the first goal on the first shot. Frederik Andersen did in each period, and that was the reason they lost that game. And I don't know. There seems to be a level of frustration with that organization regarding how to play defense, and whether this is sort of like what Washington went through before Barry Trotz got there. They have so much offensive talent, and they think they can outscore everything, but they just can't, especially when it gets tight at the end of the year. They're allowing goals that they shouldn't allow, and it may be to their downfall.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a common theme throughout NHL history. That is that high-scoring teams get to the postseason, and in particular, and find out that the game is played completely different than in the 82-game regular season. And I think the Capitals is a good comparison because they were like that as well. They had Ovechkin, they had Backstrom. They were a team that could score a lot of goals, but we all know what playoff hockey is like. There's always a guy right by your side. There's no room. It's hard enough to create any measure of scoring chances in the postseason. So even elite level teams struggle. So, they got to figure out a way to do it, which is why, I still feel this way. I still feel that Kyle Dubas is going to make a trade for a defenseman. I
think he's going to try.
I think he'll get one. And I've argued about this on my other podcast with Tom Laidlaw. Mm-hmm. He doesn't think that could make a difference, one guy, but I think he can.
It can for that team.
20 minutes if a guy who thinks nothing about except defense is out there, that's a third of the game.
Right.
I think the odds are higher now based on what happened last night because Andreas Janssen suffered a knee injury.
That was a rough one.
And when I asked Sheldon Keefe after the game, he says it's not going to be short term, which means, we're talking, what are we, 7-8 weeks before the end of the regular season. If it's a serious knee injury, then he could be out the rest of the regular season.
Okay, so now this is where I call the timeout and say, if they don't call up Jeremy Bracco, then they never intend to use him ever as a Leaf.
Well, Russ, I don't know what's going on, but Jeremy Bracco is on indefinite leave right now for personal reasons. So
right, no, I know, but I'm just saying, if he doesn't come back and they don't use him, then there's definitely something going on. The other thing I want to mention is Jason Robertson played his first game, got his first NHL assist. I brought that up yesterday that he was getting a call up. He's a big physical kid with a great shot. That is a guy who could really help the Stars down the stretch. The other thing is, and this was totally predictable. Yesterday, Kev, I said, Tyler Seguin hasn't scored in 12 games, and he gets a goal because he has like 7. Well, now it's like 8 goals in 15 games against the Leafs. Like it's almost a guarantee.
What's remarkable about the Stars, given where they're at in the standings, is you look at their top 3 players, Ben, Seguin, and Klingberg. They're all having inferior seasons. Last year they couldn't get any secondary scoring. They were a one-line team. And this year it's been the exact opposite. Like they got everybody else going, but they don't have their stars going.
And Pavelski hasn't had a great year.
He's another one, yeah.
I have the answer, only because I listened to Marty Turco, a guy who I've spoken a lot to over the years. So the one thing Rick Bowness is actually known for is defense.
Yeah. And
Rick Bowness has really instituted a defensive system there that's working better than what they had going.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of it. And also Turco brought up a really nice thing with Jeff Marek. They both did that. Radek Faksa has become a shutdown guy.
Yeah.
And so while they do have all these offensive guys not quite kicking, their defense and goaltending is good. And that's doing it for them right now.
It's amazing that 4 years ago they were an undisciplined offensive first team, and now they're a shutdown team. Now,
we should have been really happy yesterday. I mean, really happy because the Leafs had a fight, And I can't believe you're not really happy over that.
No, I'm telling you one thing, Russ. That building was dead. The team was dead. Clifford fought Jamie Alexiak, and it helped them get back in that game. I think it was valuable. They really need more of that. And boy, the fans really hated it because they were sitting in their seats and they were just holding their hands. They didn't do a thing. Last thing, Kev. The Coyotes lose to Ottawa last night. They have an opportunity here with McDavid out to catch and pass the Oilers, but they've just been in the dregs of a struggle right now, and I don't know whether it's Taylor Hall's not playing well. Phil Kessel's doesn't. I think he has 4 goals at 5-on-5. I mean, it's surprising. Is it all that Kemper's not there, or
no? It is. I mean, they're a team. They're a defensive team now, and they don't score a lot of goals. And one guy couldn't make a difference. Taylor Hall's numbers are respectable since he's come over there. He hasn't been dominant, but he's been fine. He's doing what he's supposed to do. But Kemper is too crucial to that team. Like, they need him in there, and the defense. And they're another team, like you mentioned, that Kessel hasn't been unbelievable. Ekman Larson hasn't been unbelievable.
Right.
That's another one as well. Like, you look at his point totals; they should be much higher.
Their best defenseman's been Chikrin.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I do want the last thing I'll say is all hail Torts, because he is going to bleed out the loser point in every one of these games, losing all of these players and stay in the race.
Yeah,
and that's what's going to happen.
He's been Tortorella is not only coach of the year; he's been the Blue Jackets MVP.
He really is.
Yeah, no, I like. Sometimes coaches get too much credit. Not in Columbus.
Agreed. Good note to end on here. All right, great show, guys. Have a happy weekend, everyone. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without